Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you what's new in GIMP 2.10.14. But of course, before I get into that, I want to direct you guys over to my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, I have tons of GIMP tutorials and Inkscape tutorials on here, as well as my GIMP book of layers and GIMP and Inkscape help articles, so definitely check that out. You can enroll in my GIMP 2.10 masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy. You can enroll in any of my Skillshare classes by visiting gimpschool.com. And as I just mentioned, I have my brand new GIMP book of layers, which you can purchase on Amazon or get it free with a premium membership to Davies Media Design. I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. So if you're like me, you probably feel like you've been waiting forever for this latest release version, but it's finally here. It really hasn't been that long since the last release version, but the GIMP team has been teasing all of the great features that were to come with this version. So it's finally here. Let's dive in. The first feature I'll cover is the ability to show all. So what this feature does is it's going to show all of the pixels that are spilling off of your active canvas area. When I first started using GIMP, this was one of the main features that I felt like was missing from the program. It gets a little bit annoying when you are doing something outside of the canvas boundary and it just gets cut off and you can't see it. Well, in this latest version, you can now see what's going on outside the canvas boundary. So the canvas boundary is going to be, right now it's this yellow dotted line. That's actually the layer boundary, but because this is our only layer, this is also going to act as the canvas boundary. But let's say I hit Shift S, which is going to access my scale tool, and I scale this up, and let me hold the control key to scale it from the center. So you can see there are parts of the image spilling outside of the canvas. I'll hit scale. And right now you cannot see what's going on outside the canvas. You can see that the layer boundary goes outside the canvas. That's been a feature for quite some time. But now we can come over here to View, Show All, and you'll see right now it's not checked, but when I have this checked, that's going to turn our canvas basically into an infinite canvas. So it's going to get rid of that dark gray area that usually surrounds your canvas. And now we have all of this empty space here. By default, it's going to be represented as this alpha checkerboard. So this is what represents transparency. So this is basically just trying to tell you that nothing's out here. And then the actual canvas boundary now is this red dotted line. So for me, this kind of opens up a whole new world of photo editing and manipulation because you can drag in new layers, new images, whatever, and set them outside of the canvas temporarily, and then you can work from them in a variety of ways. You could drag them onto your active canvas whenever you want. So this really adds a ton of new functionality to GIMP, and in my opinion, it takes it a step up as an open source program and really helps it to start competing with Photoshop. And let me hit the M key to grab my move tool here. So you can change the default. Right now, by default, as I stated, the background here, which is actually called the canvas padding, is going to be this checkerboard. But you can come over here to Edit, Preferences, and if I come here under Image Windows, you might have to click this drop down here, and I come over here to Appearance. Here you'll see the Image Window Appearance option, and I can come down here and I can turn off that canvas boundary if I want. And it's not turned off right now because I haven't clicked OK. And I can come over here and I can change the canvas padding mode. So right now it's set to From Theme. I can come down here and change this to Custom Color. And then let's come over here and let's go with like a red color just to see how this looks. And I'll click OK. Now I need to close GIMP down, so I'll just close it down real quick. And now I'll reopen it. So we'll come back up here and we're going to open up that image we were working on. Hold Control and zoom out. So now you'll see we have the red as the default background color here for the canvas padding, and that layer boundary has disappeared. I do want that layer boundary here though because I think it's really helpful, so I'll just turn that back on by coming back here. We'll go back over here to Appearance. I'm going to change this back to From Theme, and I'm going to check the Show Canvas Boundary option, click OK. And let's come over here, close down GIMP, and reopen it. And we're back to the defaults. And I forgot that the image size right now is the same as the boundary size. So I'll hit Control S to grab my scale tool, hold the Control key, hit the Enter key to apply that scaling, and we have our red dotted boundary back. So I've talked more abstractly about what you can do with this feature, but now I want to demonstrate something a little bit more specific. You can use your paint tools outside of the canvas boundary now, which you couldn't do before. Previously, when you painted outside the canvas boundary, it would just disappear behind the boundary. But now you can paint outside the boundary, and you can use tools such as the patch tool or the heal tool to grab a source area outside the canvas boundary and then paint with the heal tool inside of the canvas boundary. So let's demonstrate that, and I'm going to open up a new image to aid in this process here. So here we have an image of a galaxy, so let me just click and drag this over here to this tab, and I'm going to drop it. I'll grab the move tool by hitting M on my keyboard, and I'm just going to drag this off of my canvas. So again, the red dotted line here is going to be our canvas line. So we have this dropped buffer layer. Right now it's just showing up as that alpha checkerboard here because it's not actually inside the image boundary. You can see it appears here in the thumbnail once it's inside the boundary. But when it's outside, it'll just have the checkerboard. I'll rename this galaxy and hit the enter key. So now what I'll do is I'll grab my heal tool and I'll just increase the size of this, and I'm just going to quickly do this here. So what I'll do is I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to click to grab a source area here from my galaxy image. And then I'll come over here to my water layer, and now I'm just going to paint, and you can see that as I paint, we are using pixels from off the canvas to paint on the destination area here on the canvas, and it's creating, right now this is just sort of a mess of pixels here because it's combining the pixels from the galaxy with the pixels from this photo. But if I came over here and grabbed something like the clone tool, I can directly clone this image, which is off the canvas, onto this image here, which is on the canvas obviously. One thing I want to note is that selection tools cannot go outside of the canvas boundary still. So if I grab something like my rectangle select tool and I try to draw a rectangle outside the boundary here, you'll see that the selection area will still stop right here at the canvas boundary as denoted by the marching ants. So that's a feature that the GIMP team says they plan on integrating into future versions of GIMP. It's still just a work in progress because this is such a brand new feature, and they've just had to work out the nuts and bolts of the basic form of this feature, which is already pretty advanced actually. All right, so I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that, and I want to grab my move tool here and just move this image inside of the canvas area like so, just to demonstrate the next new feature. The next new feature is found on most of the transform tools, and this is going to be the ability to transform your entire image or composition at the same time, kind of like you would do with the transform lock tool, except it's just going to be a toggle now in the tool options. And your boundary is going to automatically adjust to that brand new size, depending on what you do with the transform tool. So to demonstrate, we have two images in this composition, and I still have the show all feature turned on. But if I hit Shift S again to grab my scale tool, right now this is set to transform just the current active layer, which is going to be the bottom layer in my composition, or the water layer. And then next to that option, we have selection, and next to that we have path. Well, the new option here is called image. It's going to be the fourth option. So when I click on that, that's going to allow me to transform everything here in my composition. So now when I click and drag this, you'll see that both layers are going to drag, and I'll hold Control. So I'll go with right here, and you'll remember that my canvas boundary is this red dotted line, and you can see it right here. So when I hit scale, you'll see the new canvas boundary is now way out here, so it's moved to the boundary based on the transformation I performed. And this feature is also available inside the arbitrary rotation feature. So I can access this by coming over to Image, Transform, and then click on Arbitrary Rotation. Now when I click and just rotate this is basically just using the rotate tool, and I click rotate. Now you'll see once again the canvas will adjust to the new size of my composition. In this case, it's matching the corners of my smallest image here that was inside of the original canvas boundaries. The next new feature, which is another one that I'm really excited about, is the ability for filters to go outside of layer boundaries. So for those of you who have watched my tutorials over the years, you'll remember that there's been several times where I'm trying to perform a drop shadow or something, and it's just gone outside of the layer boundary and got clipped off. and so I had to go in and expand the size of the layer to be the entire composition size, or at least just larger than the current size. Well, now you don't have to do that because, for example, the drop shadow filter will now go outside of the layer boundary. So I'll demonstrate this first by opening up a new image. So I'll go to Open Recent, and I'm gonna go with this image here of this lumberjack guy. So let me come over, grab my text tool, and I'm going to make this text a white color. This is just gonna be some random text here, so I'll just type lumberjack. I actually think lumberjack is one word. And I'm just going to increase the size of the font here. Grab my move tool and just move this over a little bit. So you'll notice that the size of my text layer right now is basically the exact width of the text I just created. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. If I want to add a drop shadow to this, it would usually get cut off right here if the drop shadow, went a little bit outside of this layer boundary here. Well, now if I come over to Filters, Light and Shadow, Drop Shadow, you'll see right now it's a little hard to see because there is a lot of blur happening here, but if I turn the blur down, you'll see that that drop shadow filter there now goes outside of the layer boundary and it doesn't get cut off. For me, this is a feature I've been waiting on for a very long time, so I'm really glad that they put this in this latest version. I didn't even know they were working on this feature, so this has been a really awesome bonus for me, and hopefully for you guys as well. But let me just reposition this like so. So now I'll click OK. And now you'll see that our layer boundary is going to expand to this new boundary here to match the filter that we've placed on this text. The next new feature is that you can now edit hidden layers in GIMP. This one to me is not as big of a deal as the past few features I just went over, but it's still a pretty cool new feature. And so to demonstrate this, let me just grab my Galaxy photo again and just click and drag this onto my lumberjack photo. And if I come over here and click the show hide icon here in the layers panel, this image is now hidden. And as it stands right now, this layer will still not be editable because it is hidden. So if I try to do something like go to colors, levels, you'll see a little message down here that says the active layer is not visible. There is a way to toggle the ability to edit hidden images on here. So to do so, I'll come over here to Edit, Preferences, and if I come over here to Tool Options, under General, you'll see a little checkbox here that says Allow Editing on Non-Visible Layers. So I can check that, come over here and click OK. And now while I'm on this hidden layer, if I come over here and go to Colors, Levels, you'll see now I can edit the levels of this hidden image. So I'll just make some random adjustments here. I'll click OK. Now when I unhide this, this has a levels adjustment made to it. So the next three new features found in GIMP 2.10.14 that I'll cover here have to do with selection tools. And the first one is the free select tool. So in the previous release version of GIMP, they gave you the ability to be able to still edit your selection area after you drew it. So basically before applying your selection area by hitting the enter key, you could do a variety of things to the selection area and then apply it. Well, that has now been added to the free select tool. So I'll come over here to my free select tool and I'll just draw a random selection area like so. And before I hit the enter key, you'll see we have the marching ants here, but there's also a solid line running through this entire selection area. That's letting us know that this has not been applied yet. If I hold the Alt key, I can move this around. If I hold the Shift key, I can add to this selection. And if I hold the Control key, I can subtract from the current selection here. So these are all features that were not available previously. When I hit the Enter key, now this will apply my selection area and I can do whatever I want to this selection as I normally would treat a selection area. So I'll hit Control-Shift-A. The second of the three new selection tool features found in GIMP 2.10.14 is the ability to perform a grayscale preview whenever you are using the Foreground Select tool. This is actually a really useful tool. Originally, I was wondering why they would have this feature, but now I understand. So let me come over here and go to File, Open Recent, and I'm just going to open up another random image here. So let's come over to our Foreground Select tool. Right now our preview mode is set to color, so before this preview mode area wasn't even here, but now we have two options, so color or grayscale. I'll just show you what the preview looks like with this set to color. So I'll use this Foreground Select tool, which I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to this tool before that grayscale preview mode was added, of course, but I do have that tutorial, so I've drawn our background area, so I'll hit the Enter key, and that's going to give us this blue color here, which they've updated this color box here as well. This is a little bit different. But now I can use my paintbrush to select my foreground object, which will be the woman in this case. And so I'm just going to loosely select this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I don't need it for anything. This is purely for demonstration. All right, so I've loosely selected this area. I'll hit the Enter key again. So now we have our foreground object loosely selected. Normally I would clean this up, but this is actually a full color preview right now because it's showing us what is being selected right now, and it's all in color, so it's kind of hard to tell how well this foreground object has been selected. But if I come over and change this to grayscale, now we have a black and white version of what is being selected right now. The reason this is really useful is that this is what a layer mask would look like, and because once we're done with this tool, it's going to convert this to a selection area, and then we can convert that selection area to a layer mask. This gives us a much better idea of what our layer mask is going to look like, so it's a much more detailed look at what our layer mask will look like. And that to me is super useful, and this is something that I never would have thought of, so I'm glad the GIMP team thought of it and that they added it here in this version. But I'll come back over here and switch this back to color. So if I wanted to select this area, I'll just click the select button, and now I can come over, right click, add layer mask. We'll add it based on the selection and click add. And now our layer mask, if I right click on here and go to show layer mask, looks exactly like our black and white preview. So that's why that's super useful. So I'll right click on here and click show layer mask again to hide that. The last of the three selection tools that I alluded to has to do with feathering edges. So if I come over here and click off of my layer mask back to my original image, in fact, let me right click on here and delete my layer mask. Let's say I grab my rectangle select tool again, and I draw a rectangle like so, and the rectangle goes off of the canvas. So let's just have this go off of the canvas. Of course, it's going to stop right here because selections currently cannot go past the canvas boundary. Now let's come over here, create a new layer, and we'll just name this rectangle and hit the Enter key. I'll hit Shift B to grab my bucket fill tool, and let's switch over to blue and fill this in with blue. Let's say I'd want to convert this to a feathered edge. Well, right now, as it stands, the feathered edges would occur on all four edges. That's always been the case. But now we can toggle an option that's going to say that this third edge here goes off of the canvas, and therefore we don't want this third edge to be feathered. So now when I come over here and go to Select, Feather, and we have this set to 50 pixels, I'll keep that there. Now we have an option here that says Selected Areas Continue Outside of the Image. So that's right here. When I click OK, let's actually delete this rectangle that we painted in earlier, and I'll create a new layer and we'll just name it rectangle again. And I still have my bucket fill tool, so if I fill this in, you'll see that all three edges here have feathered edges, and the bottom edge has a straight edge, so the feathered edge just kind of drops off here when it hits this final edge, and none of this bottom edge here has a feathered edge. So we'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that and just delete this rectangle. GIMP also has several new Gaggle filters, and I'm just going to go through them briefly because I don't want this tutorial getting too long. But the first one is going to be Filters, Generic, Normal Map. And what this does is it takes a height map and it converts it to a normal map. So right now this is just a regular picture, so it's not really doing what it's designed to be doing. But if I had a photo here of a height map, it would turn it into something like this, where it's going to show the heights using a specific criteria. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have a ton of experience in maps, so I know some of you out there who do work in maps are thinking that I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. I definitely do not know what I'm talking about on this subject, but this option is here. I can cancel this out. I'm actually going to open up a new image for the next feature, so I'll go to File, Open Recent, and just open up this photo right here. And I'll come over here and create a new image, and I'll just name this Pattern and hit the Enter key. So the next new filter is under Filters, Render, Pattern, and right here, Bayer Matrix. So when I click on that, this is going to create a matrix that is based on something called order dithering. This is a concept that has to do with transferring colors from a higher bit depth image to a lower bit depth. And it's similar to something called halftoning, which I'm going to get to in a second. And that's used for things like newspapers. But basically what this does is it allows you to map colors between black and white. So it's essentially allowing you to create shades of gray by only using the colors black and white. This is not going to be a widely used feature in GIMP in my opinion, so I'm not going to go too much more into this, but just know that this new feature is here and I'm just going to hit cancel. So the next new feature is similar to the Bayer matrix feature. It's basically going to produce the same exact result. This one has a little bit more to do with halftoning, which is what newspapers use to convert something like a color image to a black and white image, but only really using the color black. But if I come over here and go to Filters, Render, Pattern, under here you'll see something called Linear Sinusoid. So if I click on that, it's basically going to generate a pattern structure here, and this is going to create essentially a shade of gray. And there's several features you can adjust here. I'm not going to get too much into this because again, I don't think this will be a very widely used feature. It's a very niche feature, but I'm just kind of playing around with the settings here. And I'm just going to hit cancel. The next new filter is similar to the previous two filters, except I do happen to like this one a lot better. This is going to be the Newsprint Filter. So this is also going to use that half-toning principle in order to use only the color black to reconstruct basically a color image. So if I come over here and just duplicate my original image, and let me just rename this halftone, hit the Enter key, and now I'll come over to Filters, Distorts, and this one's called Newsprint. So when I click on this, I'll hold Control and zoom in. You can see this is creating this halftone effect where it's only using the color black on top of a white background to recreate your image. And you can come over here and change the type of pattern that's used with the black. So right now it's set to line. I can change it to circle or diamond, as well as the PS square or Euclidean dot. And lastly, there is the crossing lines option. I'm going to come back up here and go to the circle option, and you can come over here and just tweak these options to produce a slightly different result. And I'm not going to go into all the settings for this filter just for this tutorial, but I'll click OK, and you can see this already produces a really cool result. And I actually came over here and changed the mode of this to screen, and I thought that the color image with the halftone image and the layer mode produced a really cool result here. The last new filter found in GIMP 2.10.14 that I'm going to go into for this tutorial is the Mean Curvature Blur filter. So if I come over here to my bottom layer, I'll come over to Filters, Blur, Mean Curvature Blur, and this is what the GIMP team calls an edge preserving blur. So this is going to blur my image while still preserving the edges of the image. So I'll turn this up to 52 and click OK. And let me just come up here and hide that image there. So you can see there's a little bit of blur going on here, but the goal of the Mean Curvature Blur is to preserve the edges. So as you can see, the edges aren't basically looking smudged like they normally would. So let me hit Control Z and just demonstrate. Let me back up before I applied the blur. So let's go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur. So you can see without preserving the edges, everything just sort of gets blurred together and it's hard to tell where the edges of everything are. But on the other hand, when I go to Filters, Blur, Mean Curvature Blur, and I'll just continue turning this up, you can see it's continuing to blur this more and more, but the edges are not getting lost inside of the image. So that is a pretty cool effect there. There's also been 3 legacy filters, or just older GIMP filters that have been upgraded to gaggle filters. So these filters will now be able to take advantage of the live preview you can perform on your image while you're testing out the filter or testing out the settings. So these 3 filters are the Neon filter, the Stretch Contrast filter, and the Oilify filter. There are also 27 additional filters that now use gaggle buffers. This doesn't mean that they are gaggle filters, it just means that the backend for these filters has been upgraded a little bit to help GIMP just run better overall. I would assume the reasoning for this is to just help them get to GIMP 3.0. I think all of the older filters, or I would guess all of the older filters, have to use at least the gaggle buffer. Improvements have also been made to HEIF, TIFF, and PDF files. This includes the support of ICC profiles in HEIF images now, a bug fix for the TIFF importer, and a bug fix for the PDF exporter. So the bug fix for the PDF exporter has to do with if you had text inside of a layer group, that text was not properly exporting to the PDF. So now that has been fixed. GIMP now also does a better job of salvaging .xcf files. So if you have a .xcf file that's corrupt and it's missing certain data or parts of the data are corrupt, GIMP now does a better job of salvaging that XCF file so that I can get the most data out of that corrupt XCF file as possible, therefore helping you lose less of your work if something happens to your files. There's also been some improvements made to GIMP for Mac, including the fact that it now works with the Mac OS Catalina. On top of that, 45 bug fixes have been made to the program, and finally, 22 translations have been added by the translation community. All of this produces what is yet again another very nice rendition of the GIMP program. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, you could subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. Don't forget to click the bell icon and be notified every time I have a new tutorial. You can also check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.